I think we're on. I think we're in, aren't we, guys? I'll have to talk to Mr. Producer about that. Am I clear to go? I should be good, I'm told. Well, welcome to the new year. Welcome to 2022, people. And it's great to see the future of American and well.
We're on. I think we're in, aren't we, guys? I'll have to talk to Mr. Producer about that.
I'm getting all sorts of interesting feedback now. I'm assuming people can hear me okay out there, right? This is just playback. Okay. Is this the first that I'm live?
You're good. No, you've been live.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. It's taking me a few minutes to get up to speed here. In any case, welcome to our live stream, the Paul Ingbretson Talks live stream, and it'll be our first one of 2022. It's the beginning of a brand new year, hopefully a good one for all of you guys. And and here I am just trying to bring a little bit of the conversation of some old guy who's been hanging around this world for maybe I'd say a little too long. We're all the great students of painting. Somebody somewhere turned up. I was looking at Leonardo's Mona Lisa today, actually. My wife had the wit to bring in a crossword puzzle into the house. And we were all tortured trying to put all these pieces together. They're all about the same value. But it reminded me again of how much he brought to our attention the visual, the need to just look and draw what you see. But I do think of him as the first impressionist. And especially if you compare him with the more imaginative work of, not that he didn't do it, like The Last Supper, for example. But his use of models is decidedly different and more modern than Michelangelo's, say. And I think even than it would have been if he was Titian, maybe 100 years later, or it wasn't 100 years later, a handful of years later. But anyway, I'm ready to go. Let's see what you got here for questions and discussion today. Happy New Year's to everybody. Yeah, thank you for that, guys. Mr. Producer, you said something?
You got a hello from Colorado.
I got a hello from Colorado. Which way is up on this thing? Which way is down? What's the most recent number? I see it. I'm beginning to see it now.
Also Scotland, looks like.
All right. Wow, this is good. Yeah, I like it when you guys mention where you are, midnight in Scotland. I've done you no favors, have I? Unless you're just used to being up since it's the new year. There's Tattoo. So many of you guys I recognize. And I love seeing these new faces. There's Mary Jo. Hi, Mary Jo. Colonel Cadmium. Are you new? Are you new to me? That's a question. I can't say I remember that name, so let's see what else we got here. Excuse my not being in your... Here, I'll try to do this better so you can see my face a little bit. Okay. Good. Thanks, T88. Best way to start the new year. Can see, can hear. Good. Oh, there's always a delay. Yeah. There's Anakin, my faithful Anakin. How are things in Colorado? Are you holding the place together out there? And Texas, right? Yeah, we were trying to figure out the time frame to do this and where our viewers were coming from. And of course, should have been self-evident that most of our viewers would be from the U.S. So that's what this is. We found that 53% of you want this time frame. So I guess Scotland, you guys might be in the 28% group, or 23%, whatever the next group size was. But yeah, I'm pleased to be here. I'm very interested in anything you want to talk about tonight. One thing I want to talk about before if your questions aren't starting to come in already. Yeah, we're still in the introductory phase. But if you want to do something for yourself, look. One of my former students, who's now my son-in-law, brought the word heuristic to my attention. That's in English, Heuristic. And it's a word that means to find or to discover, and it strongly implies the search that I try to get you to get yourself involved in all the time, which is that trial and error search. Put out something and think about it and find things to review it with, for example. And you're talking about hitting a color note, but look up that word heuristic. But it has everything to do with what you're going to need to do if you're going to be a self-educator, which I'm afraid when it's an atelier of the air, as I've been referring to this, you're going to have to become more of a self-educator. And I saw that some of you guys are doing that. I don't know if I can remember which ones in particular. But Shenandoah Valley, cool. Michigan? Oh yeah, that tattoo, I knew you were from there, didn't I? Puerto Rico. Hi, Brian. That's great. Let's see. Kentucky, very good. Indiana. Troy, I don't know that I noticed you were from Indiana before, so great. Idaho, yeah, I've been in Idaho any number of times. I lost my best suit there once on a motorcycle, the back of a motorcycle. Let's see. Snow covered, yeah, that's no surprise. Yeah, we're snow covered too, so if that makes you feel any better. Cape Cod, yeah, Lisa. Ross, Melbourne, yeah. 11 a.m. Oh, that is comfortable. Man, I don't get the time frame then. That's 11 in the morning. I thought you'd be 12 hours away. That's good, 11 a.m. Wow, so yeah, I'm glad to see that. Connie in Kentucky. Hey, Connie. If one of you guys, by the way, if I just look right past your name and I'm supposed to, I've already met you in person, you're welcome to yell at me. So here the questions are coming in. So let me look at if there's a few more of those. So Indianapolis, that's Verity, Sam from Eastern Washington State, Minnesota, Colonel Cadmium, and David from Pennsylvania. Yeah, nice. I appreciate hearing these. I guess I'm a sucker for the exotic. I like some of these guys coming in from Morocco and Australia, of course, and Scotland. This is great. And I say exotic only meaning I'm in the States. Different continents here. Sweden. Ola, I assumed you must be from Sweden. Yeah, you've made some sort of a contribution, I think, recently, and I thank you very much for that. And we have 3 or 4 other people, by the way, that have contributed. Let me just mention you all now, since your names probably are coming up. Theodore, thank you for your monthly. Bailey, is it Bailey Rick? Baileywick, okay. And Salman and Stephen J. Thank you very much. It was really useful. Apropos of this, my producer winds up doing a whole bunch more work, so he's costing me more. I'm going to get him in trouble. I'm going to get myself in trouble with him. So Florida, Northern California, yeah, Zorn country, right. Yeah, that's a companion to our thinking. Yeah, good old New Hampshire. Hi, Norm. Hi, Norma. I'm going to see you in a couple days. The painted trout. That's very good. Very good. I like that. Jocko, nice to see you. Yeah, I'm going to start going through your. There are several different. Questions already starting, so I better get on to these, though. If you do first come in, though, mention where you're from. I like to know that. That's really good stuff. Yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts. This is now Colonel Cadmium, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on portraits. What makes them so difficult, at least for me? I battle with proportions. Any advice? Well, it'd be a question, of course, of how you're doing it. Did you make another point? No. It'd be a question, too, of how you're doing it. I found that portrait painting has gotten easier the more I'm visual and the more I do have this idea of doing points and angles. So, the more you can stay abstract and not know you're doing a portrait, so to speak. Every once in a while you watch over your own shoulder to see if it looks like her yet or him. But I've found that the most important thing you can do is just stay out of your mind, stay out of your knowledge. Don't try to understand a portrait or skin or any of those things. It's color value notes, what they do and where they're, what they do when they meet the next color value and where they're located. And before you know it, you'll find the thing making itself. At the beginning, even when I tell people to get an initial idea of the thing in front of them, which you must do, there are other points I'll make that come to mind. But getting the idea of it, you want to get the idea of it not as a human. You can look at it any way you want. I mean, you can look at it and say, I like that. I get the feeling of that person. But what you're really trying to do is see the person in terms of what it is, as it were, as paint. So you want to always be seeing the thing as if it were two-dimensional phenomena, as if it was already the painting. And it helps a little bit. So these are just a couple little ideas. One of the things you're probably talking about having difficulty with in portraits is the fact that the model doesn't hold still. And then if you don't have a good memory and if you're fearful of finding the pose again, that'll cost you a lot. You really have got to learn the strategy of finding out when the tilt is right. For example, if you have an ear, you can see the relationship of the ear to the nose. If you're not good at getting that tilt and the turn of the head, so that find some landmarks so that you can tell for sure how the head is turned. And then there's the tilts this way. You got to get good at those things so that you can. Thanks to Mr. Producer. We're trying to train me in some new stuff here in terms of where I'm looking, so it's kind of amusing and distracting. But that's kind of a big thing. If you don't have a capacity to memorize key places, and you got to make sure you get the model in the same position in general too, because the overall effect will change a little bit. But so there's two things. Now I'm saying this like to a beginner, but there's two things. Like when you're standing in front of a model, you have to be standing in exactly the same place. Otherwise, you're torquing the model around. Models are usually pretty good at getting, and not all, but usually pretty good at getting roughly in the same place. And then you need to, but you need to be standing in the same place so that you're not messing with the model. So make sure that the studio is not eating your lunch. Put a piece of tape on the floor so the distance back is the same every time. And make sure, by the way, if your proportions aren't good, you might be too close to your model. It's possible. Now, most people don't tend, if you just talk about a head, to sit too close to the model. But often with a figure you are, when you do a 3/4 length, people are often not 3 times the greatest dimension of whatever it is you're painting back away from the model. So those are just some of the things. I won't try to finish that off, but if you want to throw some more points at me, I'll pick on it later. So, and my goal tonight is to make sure I talk to everybody and then to make sure I give you enough information so that you've had a bit of a conversation. I want to say one thing, if my producer, Mr. Producer, would put it up there, I'm going to say, I want you to know that I have an email address, and I want you to feel free to also email me. And one of the things that people do is they email me sometimes, I get more in-depth sense of what they're trying to say, and from there I can sometimes turn it into a video as well. So if you'd like, that would be, I'd like you to have that email address if you'd like to do it that way as well, if we lose you in the course of this day, okay? So let's look at Chuck Taylor. Chuck, you're new to me. Nice, welcome to the thing. You're probably not new to watching us, but what were some thoughts Gamble shared about Twilight of Painting as far as its reception and his self-critique following its release? Anything he wished he included? Thanks. You know, Gamble was an extremely forward-thinking person. And I would have been very surprised if I'd heard him say, I wish I'd said this and wish I'd said that. I never did hear that conversation. If you've heard that through somebody else who was close to Gamble, I'd love to hear that, but I never did hear that. What Gamble did provide for us was a notebook. I asked him for it. I asked him for background about how it was received. And he had collect scraps, clippings from newspapers from all around the country. He must have had 40 of them or so. And I was just reading them for the heck of it. And I would notice that every time it was New York, Chicago, any major city, Los Angeles, he was trashed. But every single small area, including Indiana, he got really, really well written up. People all around the country loved. So what do you call that part of the country, you know? But, you know, the center of the country, they were thrilled to see somebody talking that way. So it's an interesting thing in these days when you see what the media tends to do. But it was definitely one of those things that was like obvious. And then we talked about that, and he agreed that was what happened. So it's interesting, the power of some major newspapers. We won't talk about things I know about the Warburgs or whatever it's not the Warburgs, who is it? The guys buying in the editorial, the point of view of certain newspapers, what we call today the establishment. But let's not get into that. Another thing for another day. Gamble talks about that too in a different place in a thing called New Deal in Painting. And we can talk about that at some point in the future, or you can bring it up, but it's the New Deal in Painting. He was just saying all the things he was seeing about what they were doing in relation to our kind of painting. And I've never used the word before, but I often say that our kind of painting was sabotaged by something that we now look at as the establishment. But the establishment before that was Tarbell. You know, it was all those guys running the museum schools, and they're always deferred to. When you bought pictures, museum people would defer to them. And Gamble talks about that change that took place out of Harvard. Paul Sachs, I believe. But in any case, yeah, so once that starts, you know, you're in a whole different place. Let's go on to the next one. Hi, Gail. Nice to see you. Flyover country. Yes, very good. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. This thing flies ahead of me. I better get back and get all these questions picked up. All right. All right, let's see. Sweden, Hillary in Florida. Northern California, yes. I spent a good amount of time out there. Wisconsin, my folks are from Wisconsin. It's all good. It's all good stuff. Jocko, okay, let's imagine no internet, no books, only one painting. Either an original or a wonderful print. What painting would you hang in your room to look at every day? Which would you recommend for teens? Now you're putting me in trouble. Which one would I recommend for teens? You know, it'd probably have to be an imaginative painting, wouldn't it? But you know, that little moment or two in front of, which I hadn't spent in person in front of the Mona Lisa, but it just looking at the jigsaw puzzle I mentioned a little bit earlier. It's these guys that last forever are always going to be the guys you put up there. There's a reason why. I mean, I don't know if anybody is more I don't know what the right word is, more complete than Leonardo, but a single picture, boy, you really I don't do that with anything. I actually am this guy who says I might take one or two pictures from Gogh, one or two pictures from Leonardo, one or two pictures from Jerome, but I'm not this guy who tends to pick that one picture. Even when Gamma would have us pick the top 5 painters, you know, it was I found it tough, and I would just even then say, how about we just talk about the top 5 paintings? But it's a really good question. But for teens, that's a fascinating one. That's a fascinating one. You have to let me think about that one. If something comes to mind, I'll mention. I'll say more about it, okay, Jocko? Hang in your room to look at every day. It does remind me of Shaw, this guy. If you want to find a fun book, it's called Hypocrisy About Art, and it's written by somebody named Shaw, whose name I've forgotten, but it came out probably in the 70s maybe. And one of the things he did is somebody had said something like that. I could look at that picture forever. And I think he was a curator at the Metropolitan or something. And this guy Shaw just had a cartoon of him sitting there, and he was forced to look at it. And he started, you know, it was evident that he was trying to show this guy he knew that if he had to sit there literally look at nothing but that picture for the rest of his life, he'd probably lose his mind. The huge variety of nature is so healthy, isn't it? Yeah. And it's interesting. So how do you feel the role of painting has been affected by the technology and the internet? Yeah, that's real stuff. It seems to have a dramatic effect on bringing forward so much new artworks by the minute. The nice thing about that, the new artworks by the minute thing, the nice thing about it, what I'm saying is, you don't have to worry about that. You have to worry about whether you're going deep. Young people, by definition, aren't deep, and according to Alfred Stevens, there are no prodigies in our form, and I think that's correct. You find some younger guys. I recently saw a show, guys who were performing well younger. Not recently, 10 years ago, saw a show here in New England of Sargent's early works. And it was just every one of them had some glaring mistake that that everybody's going to make trying to figure out painting. But he just happened to get a nicer, earlier start. So, but I would just say you don't have to look around at all. Just keep looking at all those, just look at the field and keep finding those things that when you're looking at the whole field and you have awareness of the whole field, helps you to hang on to those precious ones that really begin to say, now this has this it and that hasn't got it and that sort of thing. But I don't look, I refer to that as looking to the left and right. I don't look left and right. I'm really concerned much more about having missed the gist of this thing. What is essential to really good painting? And that's what you're trying to figure out in painting. So I try to get people to collect cards. I've mentioned to you before, collect postcards, say, and just go ahead and make a collection, say 30 postcards. Make them, collect your top favorite painters. Or you can do it online, just get the images. And then every once in a while you're going to see another picture that you think, that one might take over. I think, pretty soon you'll start eliminating lesser ones and you'll be putting new ones in. And when you do that, you're going to be giving yourself taste. You're going to be educating yourself. I highly recommend taking that approach. And these days when you can get color images and stuff offline, not that they're all good, it's so easy to get, that stuff could be wrong so quickly, but the question of technology and the internet, almost everybody who comes to study with me, the younger people, are all talking about wanting to do something like anime or something like that. And I can't imagine that you wouldn't do better by studying, wouldn't do that better if you had studied just to learn to see better, study to learn to see colors relationally, and learn to understand color schemes, and I'm just talking about that portion of it, but with everything, learning to see values better. I see that one of the things that went on for a while there is that we got into multiple light sources, and movies I found were harder and harder to look at. There's certain old movies, film noir may be in that category, where you have much more simple light sources, and you'll find that that's a thing. It's good to understand, to have been in the world of painting, to understand the idea of single light sources and what the advantages are and so on. But yeah, and other things people can do though with technology is today, this isn't a bad thing, is to be able to take a photograph of the work that you're working on, and then because it's now in a photograph form, you can look at it as if it were somebody else's. You're objectifying it. There are a number of things that students of mine will do like that. When it comes to using them side by side, taking a photograph of them side by side, you really do have to be careful, like when you guys send me stuff. Make sure that you shoot them so that both of them are in the same light and approximately the same size. And they still won't play the same. You can see how the cameras mess with nature. It's kind of an intriguing thing. But at the least, make sure in exactly the right conformity with relation to the two things before you look at them as if you were trying to get a fresh eye from somebody. But there are things like that. I mean, I see people doing stuff that I have no idea what they're doing. Oh, I can tell you one that I did myself recently. I have a picture in the works of a nude of an Egyptian. It's an imaginative painting. The figure's imaginative, and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to try this and this and this. And I could have in another time I would have painted on that picture, and instead I just took a shot of it and put it on the internet and just added the pieces and put them where I thought they ought to go. Within a matter of minutes, I was way ahead of myself. But so those are advantages. You still have to learn the trade. Talking about how to design well and all that sort of stuff. But those are some of them, and they will. I don't see any reason why design, for example, everybody should get more efficient at it after a while, based on the new technologies. And I am taking too long on these questions, so I'll try to keep moving. And again, as I said, if I don't cover something, if you want me to talk about something or ask me something about some particular part of any of these things, just go for it in a later, iteration of your, question. Transient images. I wanted to ask if you've had experience with any form of digital painting, or if you know anything about it, seeing as how there's no limit to laying in color or the possible hues. Brian, I haven't, but I would like, if you want to develop that question to me, are you trying to paint it? Are you trying to paint it from life? That's a question. If you're trying to paint it to paint an impressionist painting using digital stuff, you might be doing this or that, but otherwise, I don't know what it is that you're doing. I've never been a fan of distortion of nature for the heck of it. There are reasons to do it, and I say for the heck of it. For example, if you're doing a mural, you want to accommodate the colors of the wall, so you'll make adjustments. You'll make adjustments out of nature. In other words, you won't necessarily be able to find the right shirt for this person. So you'll make adjustments on your canvas to improve a color scheme, or on the whatever part of the wall you're painting. But that's, I want to know more about what you mean on that. Would you mind? I'd love to come back with that one. South of France. I'm not kidding, I'm in New York. Hey, Paul. Hi, Anthony from London. Very, very nice. Benjamin, Las Vegas. Chuck from Northeast Pennsylvania. My kids used to go to some camps out there, or certain parts of Pennsylvania. I think it was Northeast. Alaska. Wow, let's see, what time would it be out there? Oh yeah, you guys are earlier. You're doing nicely. Are you 4 hours earlier? You must be 4 hours at least, huh? Welcome, Colonel Cad. Gail, in my life drawing classes, they put tape where their feet should be. If hands are on lap, that's taped. And the model, if you're painting in a group, you got to use tape. You got to use marker. No matter what you do, make sure you do that. And then make sure you talk to the model and tell them about how to learn how they're holding things. Like, put your finger right there. Remember that button right there? Get your finger there and then bring it up. Tell them things like that. But when you're doing to a group, when you're doing for yourself, I haven't found that I need to do that. And that introduces the idea in terms of, for example, things like hair, drapery, and all that sort of thing. The idea that I've mentioned to you probably before of the movable feast, as Gamble used to call it. And what it means is you don't want to miss opportunities. So if the hair changes, you've been doing the hair. If the hair isn't fantastic, and most hair isn't, it's just it's largely good, and you turn the head as part of to get it so you like it, or change lighting or whatever, as part of the whole project. But every once in a while, something will show up that designs better. And you won't resist it. You'll find a way to incorporate it. You see what I'm saying? And the idea of a movable feast is the implication that something's going to show up that you're going to want to have as a new thing, that you're going to add to the menu, so to speak. Now you have to. It's at the first times you're doing that, you're doing it instinctively, but eventually you learn how to do that pretty well. To find out to maintain the incorporative. To make sure it's incorporated in the composition. And the model finds a single point to look at to help get the same head position. Yeah, that's pretty standard stuff too. Thank you for that. Yeah, good. That's like somebody who's definitely run a classroom. But yeah, I do. I just talk generally, but I will. But the second thing I will do actually is I'll walk to the place when I think the pose is exactly the way I want it, and the person is not looking at me, but their face is turned away. I will walk to the place where I am perfectly, like the viewer, like right now you are to me, where I'm looking straight down the person's face, equal amount of distance between two ears, or the amount of ears showing, and I'll mark that place on the floor. So I can walk over there from time to time and stand there and say, and say to the model, no, you're turned a little bit. I have too much cheek. You're not centered anymore. And that's some refinement too. Yeah, these are good points. You see how though that what happens is that when the conversation is going live like this, you can get me to say more. I'm sitting here and all things don't come to mind, but that's the great value of being in an atelier setting. The question can be pushed, and the catalytic effect of it is you're going to get a whole lot more out of your teacher. So, TB88, Paul Ingbretson, currently looking at illustrators like Dean Cornwell, Tom Lovell. They seem to paint loosely like Impressionists. Did Impressionism influence illustration in the 20th century? Yeah, there's no question it did. I was thinking of a guy out here, and I don't bet I'm going to remember. Oh, Green is his last name. But even guys like Spear, is his name Arthur Spear, I think it is, who painted underwater sea creatures and all sorts of stuff like that. It affected a number of people, yeah, no question it did. When I was working with Gamble, I had this, and I may have mentioned it, just overlook it if I have, but when I was working with Gamble, I was doing he had assigned me Jason in the Golden Fleece as an imaginative painting assignment. And so I was trying to find a color scheme, and I said, oh, well, yeah, Impressionism. And I went and painted this beautiful green grassy hill glittering with the sunlight and all this sort of crap, and it looked so stupid. It absolutely, it made it look like some nutty person giving a fake snake, or a fake dragon, a leaf or something like that, and it just looked so dumb. So I had to dumb the whole color scheme down and neutralize it. And that gave it a separation from nature that was needed to convey that it's a story that's not a slice of life, but and that gives you the advantage too of creating mood and things like that, when doing illustration. But yes, there's a bunch of them that did, and those two would be one of them. If you don't know him, you should know Arthur Brangman. You guys in London I'm sure you know who Arthur is. Arthur? Yeah, pretty sure it's Arthur, but it's Brangman anyway. He's very much a person picking up that, does it in his own way, but I don't see any way you can get out of it saying that's who he is. He's very full of color, and lots of it's sunlight type effects too. I'd say lots, but not insignificant. At least, and again, I'm saying to you, I haven't seen these in person, so you guys in London can correct me if I'm wrong on those, and they really don't have that look, but I have seen them in some large books that were printed with care, where the colors were done with care. So I have a suspicion, but there's no question he was definitely influenced, and that's sort of across the board. They allowed that to come into the game in a good way. I don't know, you'd probably even say N.C. Wyeth does, but yeah. Loosely like Impressionists, that's, you can feel that's a bit more of N.C. Wyeth, but on the other hand, in certain ways, there are loosenesses that are different. Yeah, I'll think about that some more. I can't tell you I I was thinking about just as other influences of Impressionism. You talk about looseness per se, yeah. Although Arthur Spear, to the extent that he's an illustrator, knows some of those things he did, the sort of underwater mermaids and stuff, are in that camp. But a lot of them were just done for himself. But he would be a nice example, Boston trained, and really, you should look him up anyway. He's just a guy who really has fun using Impressionist information in imaginative stuff. Really nice example, yeah. Props to your producer. Lighting is great. Focal length on the spot. Mr. Producer, you getting this? With on-screen details? Thank you, Troy. Yeah, I thought so too. I think he did something special this time. It feels, still got the leftovers of Christmas, but we decided not to. I've been wearing too many red shirts and other stuff, so we decided not to do that, or he did. Not to go that direction. Thank you for that. Jen, hello, how are you, Jen? I'm very pleased to, when I run into former State House people, friends, to see you. Great to see you. That honorable means you're still in, doesn't it? So I haven't paid as close attention to you as I should, right? At the end of my term in office, you guys don't know I was a state representative. Everybody's been a state representative in New Hampshire. If you haven't been, you should have been. But you meet a lot of people that you never forget, and it's really pleasing to see you on there. I know there are going to be a couple other guys, and I bet you're going to start talking pretty soon too, aren't you? Nice to see that name again, though, Jen. Troy, light is created through sacrifice. Well, that's interesting. I don't know that I agree with that. In other words, I think people. If you mean sacrifice of truth, I haven't found it to be true if you mean relational truth. I find that I just have to get deeper and dig in better and do better at the relationships, and I get more and more of the light. But you also have to have a compelling interest in the expression of light. As I was saying in one of the recent videos, that the subject of the Boston School guys clearly, as Gamble was saying about them, but he was saying about Impressionism, the subject of the Boston School guys is clearly, when you compare, for example, to the gentleman from Belgium last week or so, the subject is clearly different. This guy would definitely get the light, but the Boston School, you could see that that was clearly more in the nature of being the subject. So if you said sacrifice, and you mean they said their subject was the light, so everything that turned them on was about the light, and were they sacrificing something, then the argument would be a good one, and that would mean that what they're sacrificing then is some sort of levels of detail and that sort of thing, which we learned early. If you want the power of the larger thing you're trying to tell, you're always going to have to be doing less of something else. There's a very funny thing. I used to buy into the idea, and I think Gamble supported it, that you really wanted to be doing everything good, a certain amount of detail drawing, a certain amount of form, well, you just want the truth in front of you to be true. But you don't have to pick it all, and you don't have to be living by some moral standard of that you're not doing it all equally well. Now, every student should learn to do everything equally well. You follow that. But every picture is going to have this through a prism thing that you've heard Stevens mention before, where it's through the prism of personality, and the personality is that part which is saying, man, isn't that amazing? And then comes to terms with what makes it amazing, and then makes sure he gets that thing he's found there onto the canvas to the exclusion of whatever would be interfering with it. So that's a great idea when you mean it that way. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Jen, by the way, that you look marvelous. All right. Art by the minute. Do you mean art by the minute? Do you mean, what's that? Oh, okay, sorry, okay. Thanks, Mr. Producer. You guys are talking to each other out there? Hey, Mr. Producer, what does NFTs mean? You're in sort of the millennial camp. NFTs? NFTs, yeah. What are NFTs?
Read further.
Oh, it comes up? Okay. Non-fungible tokens. Oh, okay, all right, yeah. If somebody just, was that a donation question? Would you take it to be that, Mr. Producer?
NFTs.
You could donate NFTs. I'm a Bitcoin guy. Yeah. Thanks to my son. Thanks to somebody. And from Ipswich, hi Dennis. Yes, I know your name. Yeah. Troy, non-fungible token. Thank you, Troy. In Venn diagram of painters, eras. Do I know that? I'll think about that. Which artist is the most different from you that you were surprised to learn you have meaningful things in common with? Oh, golly. Huh. You're putting a question to me that it's not fresh on my mind at this moment, and I'm not sure I think that way. One of the things that is interesting about people is, though, certain bodies of knowledge, like certain of my students would be really, really interested in exactly what year so-and-so worked and who was alive then and all those sorts of things. I've never been that guy, but I've never found it not valuable, never not useful. But I think we tend to glom on to certain kinds of things. But let me think about that some more. It's a good question. I think I want to come back to that one. In terms of painters' eras, which artist is the most different from you that you were surprised to learn you have meaningful things in common with? Past or contemporary? Yeah. Nothing's coming to mind, so I don't want to just pause here and be dead, but I hope something comes up that triggers me a little bit. And if you want to say, well, interesting, yeah. I would suggest it might conceivably be an illustrator, per se. Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that. I'm interested in that question, as you can see. So maybe my Mr. Producer at some point will send me back to that, so don't forget to do it. Lovely conference. Thanks, Maria, from Lebanon. Wow. So Maria, put down somewhere what often would be. You said do it often. I think we're thinking to do it at 6 weeks, and we never seem to get ourselves within the 6 week bracket. Is that too often enough? Maybe some of you guys can put some words into me. We're doing a new informal poll here now. That would be nice to know, because I would try to be more assiduous in following something if I had a reason. Mostly it's convenience for me, but I've never looked up strategies about doing this kind of stuff at all. But so for your sake, something would be more useful? Would it be useful? It's digital art on blockchain. Yeah, someone, you all have seen the video of that I did, what I call the GBA violinist video. There's some conversation of doing something like that with that, and I don't know what it means, but there's a conversation. I may learn something one of these days soon, but I better not try to learn it here. I could be all night, and I'm very retarded in the world of technology. I remember getting a computer for my son, and I remember I could see in 10 minutes he owned that thing, and I've never owned it. There's something, it just came over him, and he got it. I could tell because of the way he acted in relation to it. I've never been that guy. I think your brain gets formed so completely by the time you're such and such an age. I don't know what the age is. And so it has to do with the milieu, maybe your parents' DNA, but the milieu you're raised in, Common knowledge maybe is a word for that kind of thing. Hey, Faye, how are you? Hi, Paul, I want to start a transcription book. Could you do a demo exercise on transcription of your favorite paintings so we could all follow along together? Transcription, do you mean to copy a painting? One of the only things I do right now, or have done recently in copying paintings, I've copied paintings for people, but there are certain kinds of paintings that I would do the way they did it. And then there are other kinds of paintings, like the Paxton. When I copied the Paxton, I copied it the way the Boston School guy would have made it. I still knew, and by the way, I was doing it as a test to myself. Paul, since you're raised around Paxton and the Boston School guys, and you say they're so different in their approach, and their end goals are so different, can you paint a Paxton this other way that you find so much more efficient? For sure, I had done that at that time. So I laid it in, lost and found, and all that sort of stuff, exactly like a Boston School, as if it were a slice of life. And it was kind of surprisingly and fascinatingly easy. Would I do that every time? I have a suspicion. I recently, and I'm working on something for you all to see, but I I've just laid in a setup that I've just done that is that Caravaggio still life. It's not the same one I showed that I made up for you in that how to set up a still life video, whatever that question was. But I set one up somewhat like it. So it was patterny. So as soon as I looked at it, I said, Paul, what you ought to do with this is draw the outlines of all this stuff. You'll be way closer to what Caravaggio did. You'll get better results, and you probably get them more efficiently. But in any case, what I did is I laid it in the way I lay in pictures, and I want to see what the difference is as I move along and wonder about whether there would have been a phase he himself may have even stopped at if he had had another approach. But when you say transcription, if you mean make a copy, talk to me more. Tell me some more about what you're thinking. I don't use that word transcription is all I'm saying, so I don't know what you mean. Velazquez, Pope Innocent DX, best portrait ever. You know, that's an interesting question. I've never thought that about that picture, but I've always been enamored of the one by not Van Rysdale, Van Dyck, of the Gitza portrait. It's always blown my mind. But actually, I think I like the portrait of the Judge by Tarbell better than that one by Velazquez. But isn't that an interesting discussion? But now it'd be fun to be sitting in a room with 3 or 4 people and just talk about why, you know. That's a really, really wonderful question. And I won't tell you that many people don't agree with you, you know, in terms of the older conversations I've read in books and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's interesting, very interesting question. Yeah. And I like it when you, by the way, somebody referred to them in a conversation held this weekend. My son-in-law used the word assertion, and they were sort of used in a pejorative way. You're making assertions again. I like assertions. I like statements like that because they're projecting something that has some solid merits, right? And then that thing about defending it and showing why it's so cool and so important to all of us. If it's me, you'd say Gamels was saying that he still thinks that the greatest impressionist of all time, and of course these guys were way too close to him anyway, was Velazquez. But I think that Velazquez was in precisely what he was doing. In one sense, you wouldn't say he was outdone, but he was extended by for example, in that portrait. That thinking is extended, and do you want to say better or not better? I don't know. But I suppose it has other levels, though, when you're talking about what do you want a portrait, what do you want the expression to say, and all those things. Maybe that's a big deal. These are all really worthy considerations. I like having those questions. Man, that's very good. Pseudo, you just did this to get me not to be able to read it, right? Pseudo from Moose, safety valve of truth. Very good. Very good, Mead. Very fun. With a name like Mead, are you over there in Scotland too? I mean, you know, the English world has all those names too, so I don't mean to assume you are. All right, follow up to the digital. Okay, which painter can you help? Yeah, which painters can you not help liking? Dolly, for example, despite perhaps their subject matter. In general, what can we learn from painters, even though we don't like the particular era? Yeah, you know, one of the classic things you learn from good painters is that they know how to put together unity of surface, unity of effect. You know, this unity thing, all the good painters have this thing that I call unity. You can get that from anybody. You know, you get a guy like Rubens, and he's doing something that I would never be caught doing. I should never say that because, you know, there's this fascination. I can see there's a part of your mind that could be fascinated. But Boucher's in the same way, you know. Watteau less so. I could see myself painting a Watteau way before painting a Boucher. But what is not to like about that sheer staying in sync with his own central idea as to form, you know? Or style, in the case of Rubens, or Greco. But that's something you can learn from. Take that from anybody. I'm sure that when Degas is talking, when he says that what he wants at the end of his painting is harmony, more than detail or elaboration. Well, one of the things that Hunter said to me once in a conversation, Bob Hunter, this is Robert Douglas Hunter, for you who haven't run into that name. he said, and I was asking about his ratty edges. I mean, I was a little bit that way, but I said, I like everything about your pictures. Man, I walk with these edges, I don't know what to think. And he said, well, I do that because I noticed there are a lot of painters throughout history, and their least concern was the bigger thing was far more important than some particular edges somewhere. And so there's a certain false fineness. I think is what he would have said to you. And that's true. The mentality about painting is everything has to be for that central purpose, right? Including the ways you work. So, the scattered shots of a sergeant with a fleck and a blob and all that sort of stuff that actually requires you to stand back at the right distance to get the major impact. That has its own unity. You think that's the mark of your hand. Some of it's just because of the way you're choosing to address the visual impression. Boston School style, say. And or if you're Bouguereau, an entirely different approach where you, at the end of the day, everything, or Leighton, everything has got to be smoothed up, rather, if you understand me. But the consistency, the unity of effect, unity of, most people have reasonably good colors. All good painters, I think, do. I've never seen a good painter without a good color scheme, so yeah. Salvador Dali got old for me when I saw him paint skin with one color. There's something about that that turned me off. Now, it wasn't his use of photography, but there's something about that made me less interested in him. Say a guy like Brangwyn, if you want to call each of them kind of an illustrator, if a guy like Brangwyn was far more interesting to me. Good. I love that question. Yeah. Which can you not help liking? Look up Dolly, Dickens, and Others by George Orwell. You'll have a better sense of how I feel about Dolly. But I want to tell you, I did hold the door for Dolly once at the Rizzoli bookstore in New York. If it makes you, I don't know that it added anything to my appreciation of him. But that was one of the advantages of New York City. You were bound to run into somebody fairly famous. And he did have the cape on and a cane and was sweeping through a mustache. It wasn't this long, but it was very interesting. There's no missing who I was holding the door for. He didn't see me, as far as, you know what I mean. But, I hope he didn't. But, yeah, and perhaps despite their subject matter too, yeah. Another one's a wonderful thought. You want to take me on and on. I know if we're in a room with 3 or 4 people, somebody else would say something and this would go on for a while. It's a good one. Follow up to the digital. By the way, was that Mead Schaefer, a comment about a painter that you know about, pseudo-framus, safety valve of truth? I like your general attitude, the safety valve of truth. I hope we're all safety valves of truth, instead of camp followers. Follow up on the digital question. Yes, it would be painting from life using digital means. Yeah, like Procreate and iPod. Yeah, there's really no better way for you to study color. I don't think you shouldn't do that. I wouldn't tell you not to do that. I've often wondered about that, the medium of the digital medium. Of course, the problem you are going to have is you've got to make sure that everybody else is synced up to your color scheme if the colors are going to mean anything. You know how things come through the air. You look at one person's computer and what you sent them as a photograph. Your painting is now different. The shot you took of your painting is now a different thing than what you even thought you were sending them, never mind what you painted. So, but that's one disadvantage. But yeah, no, I've done that too. Way back when they first came out, and I want to tell you it was the first time, when the first iMac came out, I think it was an iMac, it was what were the words for those things? I found it so easy to use too. But all they had was a drawing program that was really, dot, and a little spray thing or something or other. And I remember doing a portrait of one of my nieces or nephews from it. I found it intriguing, actually. I wouldn't argue with that. Yeah, it's a medium, right? Okay, I should be able to read that Russian thing. VUN. Yes, I know you're there. Now you're telling me where you're from? I'd love to know where you're from. And the word in English would look like it says map and Love to know that. Greg Manchess continues in that loose illustrative tradition. Wonderful work. Yeah, it is nice when you guys share names, because I haven't looked at that world for a very long time. I I mean, I glance at it particularly when somebody shows me something, but I found that it was too distracting to keep watching the world as it goes round and round and around you. I took the approach to more like Jack Nicklaus, the golfer. He says you play the course and not the man. And so I found that the man around me was a distraction. And I think it's because I got a terrible competitive streak in me. So I found for me to do well in painting meant that I had to focus on Paul doing well in painting, not in Paul worrying about what Jack is doing over there. So if you follow that thinking, yeah. And thanks for that information, Pseudo. The pseudo is the last thing you want me to call you, isn't it? Very fun. Anakin, a friend suggested I try Nocturne. The nights have been magical. Any advice? Yeah, the only advice is train your memory and then paint it during the day. Paintings are going to be seen in the daytime. So I've never found a way to stand out there. I have a student who does that. He does it as a headlamp and stuff. Agam, are you out there listening? And he was in Canada doing these crazy, and he has a nocturnal bent himself. But so he was doing very interesting things. They were getting more truthful in ways that I could begin to understand what he was seeing. But I just recommend the training of the memory. I just really suggest that you sit out there and look long enough and just try to pre-picture it as if it were already a painting. And then get in the next day into the space and try it. You know, you won't be able to prove that it is true, but what you can do, and most of the night ones I find are relatively simple, like the Nocturnes of Whistler. So, but see, that's the best advice I can give. Use your memory and paint during the day. And try to do it during the day when it's going to be looked at. Yeah, it's going to be looked at during the daytime, so that you're not in a weak light. Oh, well, if I can just get you into this light. I once was doing an evening scene with Ollie. Hey, Ollie, are you out there? I was doing one of these. We stopped at the side of the road on the highway out here in my area on the Vermont side, and evening was starting to go down. It was very interesting. Found a little sort of a barn with a little road up to it, and I painted it. And I thought, man, I've hit these notes. And I got home and it looked stupid as heck. And then one night I was looking at it in artificial light, some queer artificial light I had. I don't know what combination it was. And there it was, exactly what I'd seen out there. So you see, I'd painted it in the light, which was just like a twilight in that golden something, something more like tungsten anyway. And it looked really good in that light. So I've thought since that time to take that painting, put it in that kind of a light, and then stand myself in natural light, and paint it. So, and then see what happens. I haven't done that yet, but that's one of those like intriguing things. Give it a try. But yeah, memory I think is the key to all this stuff. Oh, Jen. Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. No, I've lost my name, but yours still goes with that. I don't have my website address anymore. Yeah, you can only last so long at the State House, right? So Verity, let's see, am I skipping somebody? Thanks for you're welcome, guys. And if I don't feel hesitant to follow up with something that will extend the conversation in the direction that you're, where I'm sort of I'm letting you down a little bit or whatever, because I can only grasp it. I grasp it with the immediate what I take to be the well, what should I say? My first reaction to whatever it is you say, I just go with that, right? And to do something like this, you really have to. So if you have something else and want to project a slightly different sense of it, do that. Thanks, Tattoo. Appreciate that. So Verity says, I'd love to hear your thoughts sometime, maybe a future video on the paintings of Fairfield Porter in the context of visual order painting. Yeah, I've never been a fan of Fairfield Porter. He was hot a few years ago when I was sort of in the middle of my career, and I never saw it, what it was about him. I know that there were days, and I'm talking about early on in his career, when he had he was in greater proximity, I think it was earlier on in his career, to nature, and looked like he was evolving from there. But yeah, I've never been able to get my head around Fairfield. But again, at some point, send me one of the things I really like. Ask me about some guy, because if I don't much like him, I don't want to go and denigrate him or anything. And obviously I don't do it, so then I become bland and boring. But if you can send me one or two and say what you're thinking, then it might be a worthy discussion. You know what I mean? So if you want to send me an email with images, that would be great. Yeah, it's interesting though that you started painting, Jen. Yeah, I'm gonna get out of that, but one of these days we'll have to catch up. All right, Canvas. Canvas engineer. I like these names you guys pick. It's excellent stuff. The painted trout's got me though. The painted trout. Is there a trout that has the word paint on it? The rainbow, I suppose, huh? That's the Impressionist trout. That's the one I come from, right? So Jocko says, Mucha took on giant scale wall murals late in life, illustrating his homeland and people. Incomplete? If attempting large scale like Rubens, would you use assistants in workshops? Yeah, you'd have to. I don't see any way you could not do it. Excuse me, guys. I guess it was time for a break just then. That sneeze has been a long time coming. It's been trying to get me for a while. Yeah, and often, and I think there's some, I couldn't find really good writing on his workshop. Maybe there's something out there now somebody's done. But you hear things like he had some number, and I want to give you in the 20s of people that worked with him. And I don't think they were all automatically in the shop all the time. Jordan's, people like that. And, then some were special flower specialists, and others were, animal or something else, landscape specialists. And I always admired that. I mean, as a young person, especially thinking about large pictures. But I never was able to turn up much that showed how he did it. It was evident that he did it something in the range of 20, I think I read somewhere that he did somewhere close to 30 pictures a year through that group. And then when you know that he was also an ambassador traveling the world and doing other stuff, that had to have been a problem, that he had to solve that way. And by the way, hence the value of having if you want to call that a mannerism, a way of, of addressing the look of nature that we're all going to have in sync. And I suppose at times he would have somebody and you have to get in there and sort of make it, Rubenize it just a little bit more. So that's not, but I've always liked that. It's always intrigued me too. Yeah. I haven't seen the Mucha stuff up on the wall. I don't think I've seen it in situ, but I've always liked this stuff. The decorative qualities he brings, that element of the Art Nouveau that he virtually invents, that's special stuff. By the way, as much as I pick on style, I love style. What I mean to say is I love style, meaning I like stylizations for decorative purposes. I really do like what bunches of people have done, and he's one of them. What's not to like? But that whole thing becomes like a design thing that's different from the long history of painting. When you're designing for a cookie jar, or I'm sorry, better yet, a candy box. It's going to be different. When you're designing for a poster, like he was sometimes doing with Sarah Bernhardt, those things, you have more range. You're actually trying to make some sort of a splash that has a different, I think a slightly different model. It's the marketing thing or something like that. And so for whatever reason, I've never considered that as being, that portion of it as being part of the mainstream, or at least the way you had to get first, and what you had to be really good at. So, but what's not to like about that guy? Amazing, excellent, great, wonderful sense of line. Ditto that, yeah. So let's see, Troy, Manchester, and Franzetta. Yeah, Frazetta's in the camp of people that I don't have any reason to pick on. I like a lot of those guys. I'm not the sexification of everything isn't one of my things, and that's a sort of more, I don't know if it's a youthful thing or what, but I've never much enjoyed that. On the other hand, it goes with the territory, and I think of that more as comic book art or these kind of exaggerations and things, but I've always liked Frazetta, yeah. And there are 2 or 3 other guys around him. I don't know if I know Manches. Thanks, Fun to Cook. Appreciate hearing that you're enjoying this. Thank you. And I appreciate those comments too. Nancy from Gloucester. Thank you. You're writing that in on Joseph's email. I got to get closer to this message. I'm getting Mr. Producer is sitting here. All right. I've been told, I actually was supposed to tell you right from the beginning, we're getting close to a break. We're going to take a 5-minute break and give everybody time to run around and get a drink. and do other important, hugely important things. So, Mr. Producer, you want 5 minutes, or do you want to start like right now? Do you want me to?
Whenever, just tell me when.
All right, I'll let you know. All right, let's just do one or more questions. Troy says, light is created through sacrifice. Read it in a book a long time ago, struck with me. Don't remember the author. Yeah, that would be an interesting one to, Troy, to think through in terms of what else is produced by sacrifice, and the whole question of, is there such a thing as, for example, so there's a version of a realist that doesn't know what that is. I don't think there's really such a thing in the end of the day if you made a good painting where something hasn't been sacrificed. But what happens is for us, the students, for example, with Gamble, that the realism just became this thing about it has to be more real, it has to be more literal, it has to have more warts, and you didn't know where to stop. And I've suggested many times before to students that you have to look at what you're looking at from the beginning and say, all right, what is it? How will I know when I'm done? And that really causes you to have to be on top of the essentials. What are the crucial things that you're going to have to get across? Keep remembering you're going to run out of gas. The loss of neural energy. So you have to know what you're going for. But then secondly, people shouldn't have to drag you away from the easel. You should actually be able to paint until you say yes, that's it. I could do more picking around, but it's not going to get me any closer to that thing, that great unity of the one point I was trying to make, for lack of a better way to say it. So, yeah, that's keep thinking about that stuff. In brush skills, you mentioned the weaving the brushstroke. Could you elaborate or point out any resources that discuss some theory or techniques to this? I don't have any resources. I'm going to stop for now with this question, and we'll come back to you, Gail, talking about a monthly schedule again. You want a monthly schedule? Okay, yeah. So that conversation is starting to come up. I'll start paying attention to that and sort of take notes. But we're going to come back to whoever's right after that question on this list. And so I'm going to answer the brush skills, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break, okay? In brush skills, you had mentioned weaving the brushstroke. So, yeah, and all we mean, see what's happening in stroking, a lot of times you'll see, and Tarbell does this. Tarbell's got this tendency to break an edge by going linearly, line. And, from a distance is great, but up close it looks like, why would you even think to do that? On a transitional edge where a dark meets a light, and suddenly all of a sudden you're breaking it. Well, it turns out his background is in engraving or some aspect that was educated to that, where those kinds of marks were part of the course of making a thing look like, those marks would show. Pen drawing would be in that class too. But what we mean by weaving, so one of the things that happens in painting is you'll find that whichever direction, if you're using natural light, whichever the direction the light's coming from, if your strokes are going this way, they're going to pick up and create nasty ridges. Even if they're not nasty, even if they're not particularly ridgy painting, they'll still tend to pick up ridges. If it picks up ridges, it'll change the sense of the value of the area, right? So you want your strokes to go this way, right? But then if you run them all this way in a boring way, the whole surface just becomes boring, just straight lines. So you'd say, well, why shouldn't that work? I mean, because, Da Vinci runs all his lines in a drawing, a particular way. It's a beautiful thing. There's a great unity to it. And so in theory, I suppose you could do that, but I never found one anywhere that I thought was actually interesting that did that. So what weaving is so you have to maintain this angle, but you want your strokes to overlap, because you could just smear around. But when we put down strokes, we tend to put them down rather solidly, and then you get more paint and you put another one on. And I just found that it works better if you put down a stroke and then counter it with a slightly different stroke. And that was indicated to me by Gamble, and it's worked well. It's worked very well. The question came up, and when I addressed it to him, he pointed out, and I can't say who he pointed out, but he said, but he showed me an example. And I'd seen one, I worked for a restorer, and I remember seeing one in which it was just exquisitely beautiful, the surface. And the way the paint strokes were woven in that surface, it felt woven. Somebody else who does a little bit of it is Emil Carlson. You got to see, if you want to see his stuff in person, but that's a different kind of weaving. That's almost more like mosaic mark making and stuff like that. But when you're talking about stroke direction, all we mean by it, some strokes will go generally this way, but then there'll be one that's just almost the same way, but not quite the same. And when you're doing it, you'll you'll want to have them looking fused. This comes up with that conversation as well. So they're not stirred into each other, but they're put down in a way in which they're friendly toward each other and the whole surface is pleasing. But those are the thoughts that go with the weaving idea. Okay, let's take the break, Mr. Producer, and we'll be back in 5 minutes, whatever time it is. All right? Good. Get your All right. And Mr. Producer has been pointing out my ignorance here by saying, do you not see these buttons coming up showing that several of you, like Ron, have sent in donations? I'm going to try to mention it, but I got to notice it first, Mr. Producer. That's the level of my brilliance here. So I want to thank 3 people.
You'll see it though.
Okay, let me. Oh, they'll show up. I'm scrolling down. Yeah. Are you saying the bar will show up with
Yeah, it's
Mr. Producer? I'm not seeing anything. I went right to the beginning.
no, to the other,
Excuse us a second.
the other direction.
I'm going down. Okay. And you're saying that bar will show up.
It's lit up. The people who've donated, the super chats light up in the text in the chat window.
Well, you got me there. I don't see it. Yeah, here we are. Hopefully you guys got a nice drink. I don't know what I am without a cup, so I better have a little sip here just to be in keeping with myself. Oh, cool. Okay. So Ron, thank you very much. Colonel Cadmium, thank you for that nice donation. And for the sake of my, for the rest of you guys, anybody who actually doesn't know how to do it, my producer will put up the, we'll show you how to do it. Thank you, Troy. That's excellent. I appreciate those donations. Really kind. All right. All right, now.
Those are super chats, but the other, the website is a different. Here, I'm putting it up now.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. What I'm asking him to put up is actually where you can make the donation if you want to. Van Dyke was so good, wasn't it? Oh. Yeah, there we go. I'm catching up with where I am finally. All right, Gail, then I'd love about a monthly schedule. Okay. Yeah, so that's that information. I'll read those when they come up because that information is gone. He's probably already seeing it, but to Mr. Producer there, and he's the one that tends to schedule me, and his schedule for that kind of stuff probably is more busy than mine. Jack Kirby, yeah. Yeah, they might, yeah. Is Frank Frazetta still around? That's a question. You mentioned Jack Kirby and Jocko. All right, Troy Gilmore, warm light, cool shadows, cool light, warm shadows. Is this BS? Actually, everything being relative, it's not BS, no. Daytime, this is the conversation that goes with Leonardo. So be sure if you haven't read it, everybody who wants to be any good at anything, read Leonardo's notebooks. I'm not going to tell you everything in there is right on. There are things he suggests that we've learned, they're just nuancedly different, but enough so that we don't do exactly that. But and I don't want to refer to anything particular and get into that depth because there's almost nothing, but there's so much good information there. The idea of middle tones, calling it sfumato, giving the idea of smoke, the transitions are so nuanced, and that's where you want to look at the Mona Lisa to really understand that. But no, what he said is that when he was outdoors, he would notice that the shadows were cool on a sunny day. The sunlight hits, the shadows are cool. Now, you could say the shadows are cooler, but in fact, outdoors on a blue day, when the sun would be hitting, the shadows have nothing, they're not getting any of that direct warm light, so they're cool, right? What you will notice indoors, after you've painted a lot of work, done a lot of things indoors, is you're going to notice that the light coming in is cool, because it's the blue, if you're north light, it's blue light. And you will notice that the shadows are golden. Now, on a grayer day, they can get almost to be equal. But those things are real, and they're notable, and there are large differences. Now, when people start making that stuff up for, just trying to do something for their own pictures, that's use of real information. In fact, I've used artificial light a couple times making still lifes. And what I do is I create an ambience in the room with say, neon, a cool blues, like something like that, neon light. Then I use warm lights, like tungsten, warm lights, hot, whatever I want, on the subject. And that warm, cool thing really does contribute some life. You know what I mean? So there's some life to the lights, is what I was going to say. So mess around with that kind of stuff. But no, I would make more of it than that. But yeah, no, it's not. It's not BS, but it's good. It's good to mess around. Yeah. Oh, good. There's a book, James Gurney. Yeah, he's written some good stuff on a number of things. Yeah. Yeah, Van Dyke was good. Yeah, it's crazy good. Yeah. And that was, by the way, Van Dyke was this step away from he seemed to not quite be able to tolerate, although he was raised virtually as one, as a Rubinite. But his movement away toward more truth I found way more pleasing the more I got to know the two as a young painter. Yeah. Van Dyke's got that. He's got something about his, I was going to say Zoftic forms and stuff, but it's so reduced. It doesn't have that sort of sense of exaggeration that Rubens has, and is more pleasing. I wouldn't tell you that he's a better composer or any of those things. Rubens is so good at so many things. There's a reason why he, over years and years and centuries, is elevated as high as he is. Van Dyke has trouble rising to his level because of the range, I suggest to you. I haven't seen enough Van Dyks in person to tell you I think their color is very good, but the color in Rubens, the life in the color is real stuff, And I don't have any memory of really great colors in Van Dyke. So those are all just interesting questions. I can't tell you I've seen enough. And I haven't made it a study, A lot of what you've seen enough of is what you choose to see enough of. Of course, you as students, you really want to do this wandering where you're going all over the place. We're all students, by the way, forever. But you don't do this larger wandering where you're getting a sense of the whole, and you'll just inevitably be attracted more to certain things than others. It's some of who you are, Never seen a hot shadow. You can make hot shadows if you want to. You just use an orange backdrop. I wouldn't tell you my shadows are hot in my studio, but my studio is a log homes type studio. Everything around is this kind of crazy orangey brown. And I've been thinking for many years about neutralizing it, with a gray or stain or something like that. Just never gotten around to thinking that I will do that. But it's a kind of a big job too. But if you want to, that's where you'll see some pretty serious differences between the outdoors and the indoors. And my pictures wind up looking like I think a good painting is a brown one. It just happens to be the ambience of my studio. But yeah, you can create hot lights. You can, hot shadows. So Troy, I hope you've gotten enough out of that. Gail, the educational system has been smothering opinions for decades by applying critical thinking to all conversations. Getting opinions and thoughts from young people these days is like pulling teeth. Now you're talking about the system, you're talking about today's realism and that thing about, that has become sort of a new doctrinaire whatever, and I don't mean to say that because I'm that guy too, up to a serious point. But are you saying that? Because if you mean, why aren't you painting a little more loosely or something like that? That just takes time. I find that it's almost like when Da Vinci says you want to first learn to paint well before you learn to paint fast. I think something similar happens when you're talking about interpretation and that sort of thing. People could ask all sorts of verbal questions, but you'd expect people coming out of or studying to make themselves into good students of nature. In other words, by making studies of what's in front of them. You'd expect your job to be to make it like, and to make it more like, the Bonnat as a teacher. That was Bonnat's conversation. And, he was the stand-in at the Beaux-Arts for Jerome. But that's another question. Maybe put an anecdote to that, Gail, and get back to me. Andy, I think a key issue in amateur work is often elements in painting that confuse the sense of depth. Perspective, form rendering. Is depth, the illusion of 3D, the first key to a visual truth? No, but it's one of the first evidences that you have it. You know what I'm saying? When Gogh says drawing is the interpretation of form, he also says that it's what's happening between the contours. And the contours sort of, in a sense, by definition, have a flattening tendency. But what you're saying isn't far from what I've found the people, good painters who write about it, say. I wonder if a key issue in amateur work is often elements in a painting that confuse the sense of depth, like perspective and form rendering. Depth shouldn't be confused by form. The problem is the relationships between things are wrong. And so if you're really rendering the contrast in one area and getting it right to the contrast of another area, something reading against something else, some part of my face reading over here compared to some other part of me reading over to whatever's behind that, or something down here. You then have this idea then that if you get those things right, you'll start seeing the third dimension, and you will. And that has to do with lots of things. I mean, and things in very unexpected ways. If you have your angles right, perspective will start showing up, which will contribute to the sense of depth. So I'm finding that the more things you do truthfully in terms of the relationships of things in a picture, the more depth you're going to get. And the more depth you get, the more you are sure you're on the right track. Do you see how I say that? That's my first run through of that kind of a conversation. But yeah. You might throw something back at me on that one. Never seen a hot shadow yet. Dolly just said thank you. Yes. He did not say thank you. Oh, golly. Let's see how we're doing here. Oh, good. Thank you. Oh, there's a pretty significant thank you tattoo. That's really appreciated. Really appreciated. Thank you for that. And this is very nice, the way you guys are engaging this in a sort of full way right now. I love seeing the older faces and the older names, new names. None of you guys strike me as being older, but it's really great seeing you. And thank you very much, though, for that nice contribution, donation. So let's see. Yeah, Dolly's funny. Read. I'm telling you, Gail, read Dolly, Dickens, and others. You're not going to like Dolly anymore. And I'm not trying to do that to make you dislike him, but he just talks about these three guys in a very interesting way that maybe you could argue that it was only George Orwell's perspective. Very interesting. Hi, Linda. Yeah, Happy New Year to you also. I don't know if I said Happy New Year to all you guys who said that to me, but please, I am hoping you have the greatest of years ahead. Fun to cook. The first name in Russian is pronounced Maria. Okay, I've learned some Russian today. I got to now look at it. And I think the last name is Lexachivia. Phonetic Russian as best as I can do. Hope I didn't completely mess up your last name, Maria. Thank you, Fun to Cook. Fun to Cook, are you going to tell us where you're from? Why you know Russian? I'm here to do this thing about assuming you're from this part of the West. I have a hard time thinking of Russia as being the East, so I guess Russia is very middle-ish in my way of thinking. But I think it is technically part of the West in the greater rendering of thinking about that. All right. Is Lexachivia, yeah, okay. So Craig Mullins, James Jones do great digital work. Also Ron, that's good information. You guys pick up. It's nice you guys talking back. It's good stuff. Getting these names out there is good. Sunglasses. That was an answer to something, but I don't think I know the answer to the question that was an answer to. Hi, Paul. I try not to bother too much about putting a label on myself, but people out of respect like to call me an artist. What is an artist, man? What is an artist, man? Or what is an artist, man? Are you an artist?
Me?
When is it art? No, this is... are you talking to me, Mr. Producer? Are you,
Artist mean?
oh, maybe mean. What does an artist mean? Yeah, it's one of those things, though, that I found that I've never wanted to refer to myself that way. I'm afraid I've said to myself that at the end of times, when people keep on looking at this thing and finding the same in that they find in all this thing they call art, then we'll call it that. Right now, I call myself a painter, and I prefer to stay there. Okay. I suppose I was slightly influenced by Gamble using that term in only derogatory ways, and he would say artiste, and a pretension, and a way of sort of projecting the idea that you're a pretender, a poser. I do remember once as a young man, I was a high school kid, and somebody gave me a beret, and I wore it one time. Nobody said anything. I felt stupider than posing like that. Here as a kid. Yeah, I spent my life, in the high school. I did so much work in the independent work, like 4 hours a day probably, doing sculpture and stuff, independently. So I had this stuff, but I remember thinking, no, just work hard, Paul, just work hard. Don't be a poser. I like that question. Yeah. When is it art? Yeah, in 100 years, if you're lucky, it's art. That's not a perfect answer, but it's the classic answer. So, Ron, thank you for that too. Yeah. I think that was from before. Okay, so I'm just picking you up again. What are the signature hallmarks of an authentic, mature period Ingbretson? In 50 years, how can we tell if we have a forgery on our hands? What did you even your early work have that you retained? Well, there are several things that I've always loved, and that is the sense of form, the sense of light. But I think that the thing that I even find in myself, I was actually very pleased to see this. I'd never seen it before in Da Vinci. I haven't looked at it. I hadn't looked at the Mona Lisa with that thing in mind at all. But that is the management of edges. And I'm talking about making sure that every single edge has its light effect. When you say edge, I mean with a dark meets light, every contrast has its relative light effect to the whole and to its own area, its uniqueness to that whole area. Yeah, you may as well put the light on since I'm staring at that camera anyway, Mr. Producer. Just follow my eyes, right? That's pretty lame. But that's true. But what you always hope for, I mean, you hope to keep on making your compositions more unified. So these are always the things that you're saying. At the end of the day, you want to have had a really good composition, a really good color scheme, which is part of that. Good drawing, meaning you're not out of proportion and all those sorts of things, and have a good sense of form, and as well as quality light, and then every aspect. So one of the things that happens in painting, Gemma used to talk about the word patterning. And I remember early on, I would always associate it, or primarily associate it with silhouette. He did a mixing a number of times in such a way that it would confuse, like he used the word arabesque as if it were silhouette. But I took patterning to have that same quality. But patterning in painting is bigger than that. And this is one of the things I hope in the end to have people notice, as it were. But that is rhymes, rhythms, the way a color has, or I say, why don't we just say, instead of that, just say a curve, and how this curve gets into an interplay with curves until you could say, oh, there's a pattern to that. Do you know how I'm saying that? So, but that's one of the other things. But yeah, I think what I yearn for is just to have the same things that all good painters have. First of all, you got to figure out what the heck that is, then you got to figure out how the heck to get it. And then as other piece is always that sense of truth, that veracity thing that has everything to do with the truth of the look of nature in front of you. So, yeah. But I bet I'm not different from any of you guys. I bet I'm not. And I don't recommend, looking back on my life, I'm just glad I never took any of the side paths, into style and those things early. Because over time, all the paintings I admire and continue to admire have this element of truthfulness. In whatever element of the painting they've chosen to work on, there's this element of powerful truth. Yeah, I'm saying too much about myself, but it's not, it's in the end, it's your problem to figure out if I'm doing that.
Remember Norma Torque?
Yes, yeah.
$100 donation.
Oh, Norma, you've gone out of your way. Thank you hugely. That's crazy. Thank you so much for that sweet donation. That's so massively appreciated. Yeah, he addresses that in one of the videos on his channel. I believe he calls himself a painter. I do as well. Yeah, Troy, thanks for that. Sam, if you work in a digital format, we still have to paint it with real paint in the end. Oh, okay, that's a good point, yeah. A printer's output is not the same as real paint. Are you not spending the required time to master the real? Yeah, that's interesting. That's a very interesting conversation. I've never had completely enough. I'd love to see some work, actually, over time that people have done and do that's been done one way and the other, just to see what's possible out there. I know that in, like at the École des Beaux-Arts, they don't even teach drawing anymore. I was told that by one of my students who visited there. He asked about it, and he said, well, they don't teach drawing anymore. And it means, of course, with a pencil and all the rest of that stuff. So I've seen already that, like at the Mass College of Art and other places, the camera is the thing. So, so do you take a photograph of something and then you do junk to it? I'm just not saying I don't mean to be negative about it. Do stuff to it. And then, or what, So I'm learning too. I'd love to know more about that, see what's out there. Mr. Producer, please get in touch with Proco, Proko. I guess I'll leave that note to you. And Verity, you're welcome very much. I just lost my spot. You want to fix me? I just lost all of our feed. I'm one of these guys who has fingers in all the wrong places when it comes to the screen. So we still have time. I'm not going to rush the end of this if some of you want to stay beyond. So I never have so far. I think we're set to do 2 hours. So, and I haven't looked ahead to see how far I'm falling behind. So I hope I can get to everybody. And but we'll certainly stop taking questions, probably 5 or 10 minutes from the end, and then I'll try to just make sure everybody's covered. And if your question, if you're particularly interested in something that you want covered, just stick around, okay? Unless it's 3:30 in the morning. I'm still going to try to address it on here. Okay. Muka Slav epics, yeah. I had a student who went over there, lived over in the Czech Republic for a year or two, and he really got himself a nice read on Muka. So that's that. The painted trout, many types of color names in the trout world. Red band, golden. These are all new to me. The brown I know, steelhead I know, rainbow. We had a trout was a, what was it called? The best flavor in Colorado of the trouts I found. Wasn't it brown? Brown was good. Oh, I can't believe I've lost that. It's my favorite trout. Good discussion. I like talking about trout. I used to fish a lot, and I don't do it anymore. I found it was just too interesting. It would take too much of my time. And I just found I really did have to focus on getting narrower. The older you get, the more easy it is to fill up your life with 10 other things. I'd love to have done more with fly fishing. I could tell you the funny story about and I did once to some of you guys. One of my brothers he has some level of, from the time he was a little kid, he hung out with serious trout fishermen, or fishermen in general. And he took one of my other brothers out fishing with him one day. And this other brother kept losing the trout. He would get a trout right up the shore and then he'd lose it. And he got irritated when he looked at the hook and he saw there was no barb on it. And he looked at his older brother, and he said, "You pull my leg? I mean, why didn't you give me decent hooks?" And sorry, it was a fly, so it had a. And of course, the one brother's trying not to kill fish. He wants to actually catch them, and if he wants them, he'll keep them. But he knows how to do that, and so it's just funny stuff. That is beyond me. It's not my world. But I would have been that guy. Just life's too short, Thanks for the side discussion. It almost seems like a very intense direction about design as an art form. Yeah. There's so many interesting directions you can go, and I've played with that a number of times, designing for different things for people. I certainly can see why somebody would use some of the stylizations of a Maxfield Parrish or some of the other mannerisms, stylizations, for lack of a better word. You can get a sense of the Art Nouveau, and I've pointed out to you all with the work of John White Alexander and Sargent. I mean, it's clear, there's clearly a stylistic element that has fed on that stream. And but there's so many specific things like designing candy boxes or making posters that are, they're special works in themselves. Calling a person, you're talking about me, Paul's a musician, but calling himself a rock star would be the privilege of popularity. I didn't see the comments about rock star or musician, but yeah, that is true. And that's when I'm talking to you guys about the patterns and things. I mean, I find those patterns in music. You see them replicated, like when you talk about the ta-ta-ta-ta, of Beethoven. You hear it echoing. And that's one of those things I think of as pattern. And it's one of those things when you're looking at painting and you drop this thing about what it is and you start getting into what it's doing, then you start hearing music and things like that. That's where seeing the relationships of certain colors as they play off of each other, you begin to hear something. And that's why I say that. But yeah, I'm not a rock star in that, and I don't have any interest in doing this to be a rock star. I'm actually just literally, with all humility. I don't have any pretenses about who I am, but I just know that the one thing that's missing, and two things. The one thing that's missing out there is the conversation you can get from a guy like Gamble, the guy who lived around all these people and had a conversation with them. And so he's fleshing out with words and with pictures you're working on in front of you. And I'm just trying to contribute some of that to a lot of you guys who are just sort of stuck in a world where people are, a lot of times you're being taught by students and there isn't this larger, longer conversation. Or you're not even getting it at all, where you're just trying to figure out how to do this in a heuristic way. Shall I use that word again? Alistair, did you pick that up? So yeah. Yeah, Emil, you do tend to bash heads when you start talking about this question of art, and that's why I say let's just talk about painting and let's let art sort itself out. You know, none of us came to painting because I'd argue this because paint's a thing. You ever paint? You saw something happening in a rectangle, so you know it's something else, right? And you spend your life trying to sort that out and find your way home. You know, find your way to that. I say home. What brought you to the dance, right? So yeah, I love that. It's a question that has to go on, and it just needs to be not rancorous. It needs to be deep, though. It needs to be. Sometimes it'll have hard edges, you know, bumping up against each other. The chair post of you now would be a beautiful painting. Thank you, Linda. Appreciate that thought. Lots of artists, very few painters. Yeah. That's a way to put it. Yeah, you must have my sense of irony there. Mary Jo, hi. Yeah, you're welcome. Please get your questions in there. So what says Emil? So what? Do we have a Discord where we can share pictures of our drawings? Do we have a Discord where we can share pictures of our drawings of a painting? Is that a question to you, Mr. Producer? Do you know what that means? Do we have a Discord where we can share pictures of our drawings or paintings? You know, I've been thinking to do that. You guys might have to inform me, but I've been thinking it might be fun sometime to have anybody who wants to contribute actually bring a painting and say, let's talk about this. I think that might be pretty cool. And it could be anything from your painting to a painting. I prefer to be a painting you like rather than one of, a painting of controversy, but prefer to be one that you think has value in it that we can just work out, But I'm just thinking about that. So you guys feed back to me if you've seen anybody doing anything like that. I'd love to see where it is and how to do that.
It's kind of a place where different people can get together and share stuff.
Okay, Discord. I've never heard that before. So cool. I'd love to have that formed or made. If somebody knows how to do it, that we could do together on behalf of the Paul Ingbretson Talks world. Get back to me. Let's sort something out, okay? I think that would be really useful to us. Who was it just a couple weeks ago? I'm trying to remember who you were. Was that Sam? Somebody sent me some images of their work, and they had done over a period of time. And I could see that they're, yes, I'm a little slow on the uptake, Mr. Producer, but I could see after a while that they were, that in this series, they and me both could see that they're actually improving. And it's very useful. It's also useful for you to see others' work because you might see yourself doing stuff and think, but not see it objectively enough. You can see more in terms of other people's work. And that would be a place where if we did some critique conversation, benefit could be had through you seeing somebody else's critique, which is pretty commonplace. Most people in studios understand that. So, yeah. We'll have to figure out how to do that. Is that in Google Drive, or how do you ever do that? Yeah.
We can look into it.
Yeah, we'll. Mr. Producer says we'll look into it. But if you have anything to send to us, do, okay? By email or whatever. The bits about paint strokes, Gems, thanks. Well, you're welcome. You're welcome, Anakin. The conversations always have more significance when you're painting and painting and painting and painting, because that's my world. I'm not really here to talk about the abstractions much. The idea of beauty, truth, and all those things they're important. They're important to me, and they're important conversations, but there's this element of where you can wander the rest of your natural life, And we're trying to become better painters. I think by and large that's my purpose out here, is try to serve you in that effort, So yeah. Could be nice to have a live session with Paul where he comments on our stuff. Yeah, might make good for a good discussion here. Yeah, that's my thought, was to do that and then create your discussion. And if we had a site where we had numbers of things, where people could even get it in beforehand, and we could then see that we have certain numbers, and then we could have conversations like this one, but we could have it focused on actually looking. One of the things is we are painters. This is all word right now. So I know that one of the reasons I realized right early in doing this stuff is that pictures are, and have me pointing at something with my little arrow, my sometimes invisible arrow, I know is a better, or is a, I don't know, more apropos, for who we are.
So it's 8:43. Do you want me to?
Oh yeah. So you guys who want to get some more stuff in, we're going to give you, say, 5 or 6 more minutes of commenting. So get your points in now, and then we're going to cut it off. And I'm just going to go through until I've answered all the questions, unless I'm here till 3 in the morning. So I hope I don't have to cut off, but I don't want to do it if I don't have to. So painting is a multifaceted discipline, like spokes in a wheel. Each must be tuned to make it turn around, to make it turn true. I like that. That's very interesting. So I don't know that name. Thank you for that contribution. Del Santro Monfiliore Rain. I prefer painter over artist. That sounds like one of the trades. Though people sometimes do think I mean houses. That's part of the fun too, right? You could say I'm a painter, not houses, not walls. Yeah, I do mean it could be critiques, or it could just be you put out a question about your own work or something like that. It doesn't have to be me just grabbing something and picking on you, but if we can find ways to do that, and you narrow it to a particular question about something. Keep on remembering, as I said before, if you can get a shot of it side by side with what you're painting, if you ever do want to critique, it was like when you showed something to Gamble, he would say, I can't talk to you about this in any useful way because I wasn't there. When it comes to the look of nature, I can't talk about that. I can tell you things that I think about your composition and how you might improve that, and so, or that your drawing is, a distorted figure here or something, I can talk about things in the abstract, or that are like that. So keep that in mind if you want to get more than that, and even whether it'll even work is another question. But I'd still be game to try it, and try it in any way that you would find beneficial. I know that lots of you guys are talking to me about trying to figure this out on your own, and especially in this closed down world we sort of have for a lot of you. So if I can open it up in some way, and as I said before, if you open yourself up for critiques, and then if enough of you do, you'll all benefit from the other person's. And I don't try to make these overwhelming critiques. I try to pick on 1 or 2 significant points. But if you then said, and then put a question out, could you comment on my something, and just to have a good resource if there is a reference to it. But yeah, let's think it through, and let's do this in the next couple, right? Next one after. Yeah, I thought Frank died. Yeah, Frank Frazetta. Yeah, I thought that was recent, not too recent. The term artist wasn't used to refer to painters no more than chemists until pretty recently, let alone the term using art ever. Art was synonymous with skills and sciences, the art of the kitchen arts, and throwing darts. It's very funny. Yeah, that's true. And so the new art schools, when somebody asks me, where the painting schools go is what my question was when I got, the art students think it was something more nearly a painting school. But man, there's schools all over the place that just became art schools. And that's what the MFA program is now. It's the Mass College of Art. They're all art schools. And I don't know what art is. Art has become, unfortunately, it's become whatever. And that's a dreadful thing, but especially for a guy, or particularly, or maybe mostly for a person who's trying to become a good painter. The guy, the young student of mine who went to the Mass College of Art and was asked how they could help him. He said, well, I want to be able to paint like Vermeer. And they said, well, that'll change. That's a different, that's an art school. Painting school, they'd say, well, look at the work of the teachers in here and let's see if you can help sort that out for yourself as you learn how to see nature better, how to manage it, or whatever, How to tackle 5 figures and 2 dogs, 2 cats, life-size portraits, some from life, animals, some from photos allowed. Patrons' money is no object, but I have only 90 days. One at a time? You have to do it one at a time. But in your case, that would be one of those places where you might just do really well to just take the photographs, take all these images and organize them into the photograph. And I'd turn them all into black and white first, if I were doing that kind of a job. And then turn them all into black and white. If you don't have light from the same direction, find some way to do it. I mean, I don't know if there are programs to do that with. Otherwise, that's one of the great unifiers of a picture, is to have the light source be in the same location. So, yeah, people expect miracles. It's a possibility in the world of the computer today. You could do something closer to a miracle. I've seen good painters do bad pictures from, what they call deaders, from photographs. I might have done 1 or 2 myself. So yeah, critiques, I guess, but it might open up for some in-depth conversation about how to tackle the challenges we might all be facing in the pursuit of grace. Yeah, absolutely, more relatable stuff. Good points, yeah. The comment about assertions, were you going to say more about that, Gail? I've always had that idea that a statement is a question. I always, in my own personal life, every statement I know, human knowledge is such that every statement you make is relatively true. And it's true to the best of your knowledge at this moment. So it's an assertion that should have built in the idea of being a, for what I understand now, point, right? So you're asserting what you know, given, and that should always be in there. It's like when somebody says, well, this and this and this and this, well, you shouldn't have to say, I think. That's obviously what you're saying. You're saying, I think, in my opinion. No, you're just telling your opinion. So I think it's like that, yeah. What do you think of Nathan Falk's painting instruction? I don't know his stuff, guys. So, Forturky. I hope you're not Folks painting instruction. I hope you're not Folks himself, but I don't know him. And I don't go online like you guys do. I'm not much there seeing these things. So, I think the choices a painter makes, but you can send me something, by the way. I wouldn't send me some piece. Somebody did send me something recently, and I can't remember who, but it was easy to show what he was doing that was different from what we do and why I would prefer to do it the way we do it. And I can talk that way. I think the choices a painter makes with material, subject matter, and manner of working are based on a fundamental sensibility. Well, yeah, within the painter. I haven't found that to be not true, yeah. Absolutely. You could argue that a person becomes a sculptor because of the sensibility toward form and actually having a sense of the feeling, like wanting the contact, the touch, like contacting form. There's something like that, and I think that's true. That's the extreme other end. We're not painters at that point. But I think that's right. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. Everything I liked about painting was about drawing until I found light and color. And then it was about all those things. I didn't drop any of the other ones, but I found myself incomplete. So I was gravitating out of ignorance. And then all of a sudden, I realized that the world is bigger than that, and I became, as it were, the modern girl who wants it all, right? You girls all know what I mean, right? You ladies. What do you think are some common qualities in works that you enjoy? Yeah, I've said that before, I think already here, so I'll repeat it quickly, but it's the sense of form, expressive drawing, that's say good gestures, all those things, but color relations in the sense of making, good color schemes. These are fairly typical, the ones I admire the most. Good composition. So I think I've said in the other thing, and you might look at that previous question if you want to review this back somewhere a ways back, half hour ago. So check on that one, because I basically said what I'm trying to get into my painting, and I listed all those things that I admire. So just for the sake of getting on to everybody before this is over, I'll leave it at that, okay? Mind going back to that, David? I like to think of myself, Sam says, I'd like to think of myself as a painter, focus on the skill of the craft, and then if some art shows up, sometimes I'm happy, yeah. Yeah, that's a good level of humility. You definitely want to be the best of the best, but there's no way to get there except putting in the work, putting in the hours, and crying in the woods if you're you know what I mean? It's 10,000 hours of well-directed practice, the mentality expressed by Well, actually, I forget who said that, but it was virtually, well, it was almost exactly the same thing that was said beforehand by Suzuki. I think that goes way back. Okay, good. Thanks, Troy. Yeah. I mean, David, yeah. Do you have an opinion? I think I was answering something that you weren't asking there. I'm sorry about that, commenting, jumping into your comment between each other. Do you have an opinion on Delazlo? I find him shallow. Yeah, similar kind of guys. And that's where I think you want to watch out for what direction you're... If you study with a painter, if you study to be like a painter, you're going to be one more step removed from the depth of painting, from the power source, which is nature. So the more you are like somebody, instead of putting all your time into being a facsimile, and less time into being attaching yourself to the source. And I think that's what he feels like. I feel like he embodies that to me, that he was a guy into a form of mannerism, put his work into that. But he wasn't without skill, drawing skills and stuff. He wasn't without it. But there's a depth in Sargent that some people who don't particularly like Sargent think I'm preposterous in saying, but there's an absolute depth of truth in Sargent that isn't had by Philip Delazlo. And you can like him for other reasons, and I don't. What I've read of his, I have his book in the studio. Students can read it, but I can't remember seeing anything that was off or anything. I just didn't find that it was the great resource. I've got more good stuff just in those few comments of Sargent's in the Charterist book, which is the one I recommend. If you're not familiar with it, look it up. There are a couple other resources that are good too. Yeah, you're right about him, Remkin, I think so. Gail, I was referring to your comment about someone telling about assertions in a negative way. They're hesitant to say what they think because it can't be proven, that kind of thing. Yeah, so a lot of people, though, and my wife is one of those people that I would say things, and she would take it. She would say, I found out that wasn't true. And I would say, and I wasn't lying. I was saying, don't you understand, I speak, that my speech, when I'm telling truth, is always speculative. I mean, I have that built in. So I say that it's like the heuristic method. My conversation teaches me stuff. So I'm looking to, thanks. I'm looking to get that. I'm looking to be that guy. I really want, even in speech, I tend to do that. So if you're hearing me like in a black and white way and saying, Paul is saying this is absolutely true. In these things I'm saying to you now, I think there are things that are, what shall we say, grand rules of thumb, nearly absolutely true. But we're in the search, all of us, for all time, until we see our Creator, right? All right. Yeah, but I agree with you, yeah. Fun to cook. I'm in Canada, had a difficult time learning French in university, so I took up Russian instead. Well, I could see why you'd take up French, but I guess you weren't in the right part of Canada. Comes in handy phonetically anyway. Yeah. Well, I thought that of Latin. I don't know about the phonetic part, but I really liked Latin because I have so many words I recognized, and you learn the roots and stuff over time. And I was one of those few people I know who actually liked being in Latin classes. When in love Russian Impressionists, yeah, and I need to do something on Russian. Some of you guys have asked about that before. I got to do that at some point. Thank you, Linda. Jocko, when and why to paint either way, read painting from nature, life versus imaginative referencing prior memorized observation. Do you ever make up an outdoor background behind a portrait made indoors? Have I ever done that? I mean, I can see making combinations like that. I don't think I've ever had the need to do it. There's one of the pictures I was thinking of. I painted somebody on their porch, which the beach behind him, and I had to, because of the way I had to set them in the light, I had to change the locations of things. But it wasn't all that much stuff, so that would be one example. I've always tried to set up, because I want this abstraction sitting there in front of me when I'm painting an Impressionist painting, meaning I'm painting with the Velazquez mentality, a portrait, a likeness, but it's a likeness that's taking in the whole from the beginning. So I try to get it all set up so that the whole thing is that shot, and then you have that shot at it with your skills as a single impression, as a unified impression. So that's mostly what I do in portrait painting. I've done a couple different things where I've had to do that with debtors, but I can't think of another one. I can't say I think it's a wrong thing, though. It's not a way to learn how to paint impressionistically or to paint the look of nature. But it's something you adventure with stuff. I wouldn't make a career out of doing any of the sort of curious things, but it doesn't mean you might not, Just learn how to paint. learn how to get unity. Learn to be a master of Impressionist unity as a portrait painter. Be a master of that. And I mean Impressionist. It doesn't mean that I think you need Impressionist color and all these things. I do mean Impressionist in the same sense as you might say it to a tonalist. Be a master of the visual impression, even if your colors aren't hypercolored. And I'm talking about, for example, what Zorn or Sorolla do when they paint portraits and they reduce the palette down to almost nothing. Yeah, Reppin, yeah. No, I've always liked Reppin too. And I'm going to, somebody maybe could send me another question to do that. I'll try to get that on the table to do a Russian review. I like to say I'm a self-proclaimed artist. People still call me an artist. But I love so many mediums. I can't just say paint. Yeah, I understand that, yeah. Yeah, I can understand that completely. That's a good point. That's well said, Runs with Caesars, yeah. Steve says, you need to release your book. I know, don't tell me. I'm hiding here. Hey, Liz and Rodrigo, if you're listening to me, give me the name of that person you think could be helpful to me, would you? I need to tell you in person to get me that. I am dying to get it out there to you. To finish out, to fulfill this conversation, to finish out this conversation, it really is rather needed. Where you write it all out in one place instead of hitting and running like I'm doing a little bit now. Yeah, booklet PDF is a cornerstone to essential Ingbretson theory. That's an interesting question, Tattoo. That's interesting. Another way of putting that too. I've thought about that a little bit. I'm working on a glossary right now, and I found that glossaries are a way in, and I'll try to get that out there in some format for you. But I think the glossary is the way in because the way you define terms is very much about how you use paint and how you see and how you think. So I'm working on that because the purpose of a glossary for me is for students to understand what I mean when I say values this way, or when I talk about general tonality, what I mean. And it's also the useful meaning that I have. I like that idea. Thank you for that suggestion. And that may be the place to start, though. I'll finish up my glossary. I've had several people here after me to do that, too. Drawing for slaughter in public. Oh, yeah, okay. Emil. By the way, my grandfather's name was Emil DG. Are you by any chance Norwegian or anything? I forget what you said at the beginning. Sandra, how are you? Hi, you're from Florida. I know you are. So you've got yourself all the way down there. Paul, thank you for teaching me in your atelier. I hope you are well. I'm well. I'm painting regularly. Blessed wishes to you. And blessings to you too, Sandra. I hope it's going great for you down there in that free state of Florida. I think many of us use digital to move things around in the compositional stage, then print it out at the size needed, transfer, and then paint. Yeah. As I said, I've done that recently, and I don't have any reason not to do it. It's way more efficient than scribbling. I always wonder how much of your imagination, how much capacity you're losing by doing that, but you're certainly not losing. The one thing you have, and again, back to that heuristic thought, you can try and error in more ways than you have time for in a life. I see some of Bouguereau's struggles with getting the figure gesture combinations, whatever, right in his compositions. And I see him doing things that are wrong again. You know what I mean? And that struggle could be speeded up. Yeah, I don't doubt that for a second. This morning I caught a 5-pan-sized trout rainbows on my Tenkara outfit, local creek. I'm getting irritated, Ross. How about we stop this trout discussion? I don't want to feel left out here. Very good. Well done, man. On my Tenkara. Yeah, you're an insider, you turkey. Very nice. Very nice. Have we discussed varnishing and protecting the end results? If not, is there a varnish you're favored toward longevity and protection? The biggest protection we need these days is against restorers. Bouguereaus are being ruined all over the place. And I'm not sure I know exactly why, except that I suspect that Bouguereau, in many of his paintings, used varnish also in the medium, as part of a medium. And I know I've looked at many lists of things he did, combinations, and I know he, Jerome, and others at different times used combinations. But the paintings that I've seen ruined, they're been reduced to outlines, is because when the restorers get in there, they have no choice. I know this one was done by a restorer in Denver. There was a beautiful picture. It's just pristine Bouguereau. And I went back to see it 17 years later after having studied painting, and the guy says, you have to be wrong. We didn't ruin any pictures here. But I saw 2 or 3 of them ruined at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I say ruined, they were changed so significantly that the surface skin on a hand on a particular painting was different. And I would have been pleased if they had said to me, in discussing that question, if they'd said to me, no, what was on there was somebody else's additions later, we just put it back to where we know it was actually his marks. But I think that's a dangerous decision to make. I took a tar bill to a restorer, and it was in beautiful shape. And the hand was down in the shadows, really dark in the shadows, but it was beautiful. It was perfect if you look at the big impression. And the first thing this restorer said to me is, well, we can bring that hand out. We can make that show better. Like, take a hike, guys. What are you thinking? Anyway, that's a different discussion in itself. But so what I'm suggesting is that what I've started doing is using entirely a medium that have nothing in a varnish that has no medium that is removed by some other solvent. Then we'll remove the stuff that's in that layer of painting that's below it. And I think that's the most important thing you can know. The more you try to make it a satin type thing, the more it can affect your color qualities and stuff as you first put them down and things like that. And you might miss out on, if your final varnish is Damar and you use Damar in your picture, you might want to put a note on your canvas for permanency. But that's the one thing I know. So if that's the major question, I better go on past that. But you do need to varnish your pictures. It really is an important thing. It's less important the more thick your paint is, by the way. I find that it's less important. But I've seen some good paintings by Monet with dirt, tons of dirt in there. And then when you start cleaning those, I suppose you're going to have less damage if there's a varnish layer. I mean, I know you are. If somebody starts just even washing it lightly. You'd be surprised how much you can improve a painting without using any varnish remover, though, just by washing it lightly. The dirts get on, old days, the fireplaces and the soot. All right. I also enjoy art that breaks away from depth and focus on patterns such as block prints. Gogh had a strange effect on me. His paintings flicker between the joy of 2D pattern making. Yeah, that's real true. That's real true, Andy. That's a good point. Yeah, Gogh is a profoundly interesting guy on so many different levels. It's really important for us to hear them on other levels than the one we've decided to live in. I do think that one thing about reaching out, trying different kinds of aspects of painting, thinking through those different aspects are huge. I'm just talking about, for example, the idea of Gogh says it's all silhouettes. You should study Gogh and find out what the heck he means, Or when you talk at Boston School and you hear this idea about spotting, what do they mean? What is spotting? It's a compositional idea. Critiques would be cool. Good. Colonel Cadmium, yeah, good. I think Discord would be ideal. Okay, great. Stuck with only one painting in your house, would you rather look at a sad, morose painting, Repin's Ivan the Terrible and Son, or Sentimental Kitsch, any by Bouguereau, Pre-Raphaelites? I am kind of a fan of the Pre-Raphaelites. I probably wouldn't mind having a painting that was more devotional or something if I'm stuck looking at one. On the other hand, from the point of view of myself as a painter, I'd want one there that I can learn from every time I look at it. And I'm talking about now the paint skills, right? Something that's got all those things we talk about in spades, in theory, right? So it's just a fascinating question. I don't deny you. And we're talking, you got that, whichever painting in your house. The Drawn to Depict podcast has a Facebook page for people. Okay, so did you pick that up, Mr. Producer? Drawn to Depict has a Facebook page for people to post their representational work. Feel free to post work there and have a conversation about representation. If that's your site, David, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting point. We should pay attention to that and see if there's a way we can imitate that. I am thinking to be able to run our wands over things and point at spots on the painting. Possibly if we could do it back and forth. That's one where we get it when it's interactive, where both of us could make a mark and say, I mean this part here. If not, I'll just have to ask it and try to get that person to be the only person speaking online or something, in the type up part. But we'll sort. Yeah, let's keep sorting. Thank you for that information. Have you ever had the feeling that you're getting worse at painting after progressing well for a time? Well, what I found is that when you're progressing, you will suddenly be getting stale, and it's not that you're getting worse, but that the work is still missing things that it needs to be good at, that you need to be good at. And so, yeah, I find that what happens is you're getting this more objective sense of yourself. The thing that surprises me over time more about my paintings is that how good I was before I knew anything. And I say that, and it's not a talent question, but I say that meaning I was surprised that I knew enough to do that, and was looking for those things. But when you think about it, a painter, a young person who's looking at paintings, you don't have to see dozens and dozens of paintings if you see them in person to begin to get a real profound sense of this fixed in your mind about what this thing is. But I have found that. But yeah, and I've definitely found that what happens too, though, as a student, you'll learn a new thing and you'll tend to drop some of the things you knew to do, but for some reason you get fixated and you almost turn this whole new piece of information into the thing. And I did find myself dropping away certain important things for the sake of something else. You may find that you need to do that, for the sake of the new level of skill, that you may need to sort of forget for a minute that you also have to be good at draftsmanship while you're trying to get light effects. But you won't keep it for very long. You'll tend to say, oh, gee, what am I doing? I forget who I am, meaning what I value. I did find that you want to learn to value when you're doing a picture that is primarily about light and color to make sure you get the essence of the beauty of the thing. I'm talking about a section of life that is about that. And don't be greedy to turn every painting into the same, like a photograph, because you'll miss the point, okay? That's an interesting question, Colonel Cadmian. Do you put touches of color in places where others might not see color in reality, even though optically it works in your painting? Maybe you saw it, but the lighting was now changed. But that last part, I don't know about that, but I try to make sure as a painter that I'm always only changing color when the lighting is the same. So I don't run into that, because you wind up in these goose chases, chasing your tail, and I don't find that of value. As much as I talk about, the movable feast, that's not what I consider a good movable feast. If the color's changing, that has its own intrinsic unity of the moment, that's the Impressionist mindset, then you really don't want to be bringing some other thing you think is pretty. That's the difference between the art or the pretty model versus the power, the truth, the unity model, yeah. But the other part of that question, even though optically it works in your painting, no, and what I found is that I didn't see color because I didn't see color out of the corner of my eye. I didn't see relationally. If you're using the outer part of your eyes well, meaning you keep looking to the side and seeing colors in sets out of instead of looking in at this one and looking in at this one, but seeing them both at the same time, you're going to find you're seeing color that no other people see. You're going to see more color. Partly because you're using the periphery, which has got more cones. This is what I'm told. Speak up, Lindsay. But so keep things like that in mind. But there's a point at which you don't see, when you're young, you don't see color. Even when you've studied color with somebody, you don't see color well. You don't use your eyes well. And when you begin to see the importance of being relational, when you play with that relational thing more, you're going to see more color. I tell that story about myself not being able to hit Gamel's notes and thinking, where's he even seeing that stuff? So there's a case where Gamel was definitely seeing something that eventually, when I was walking out of the room, I finally saw his color out of the corner of my eye flying by. I saw Gamel's notes. And I said, oh, that's something he's doing with his eyes then. What is he doing with his eyes? And I sorted it out. Because the color quality he was getting was profoundly better than my color quality. And there are a lot of good painters out there who you think they're making up colors and they're not. They really are seeing all of it. And that's what I try to get students to say. I say, dude, can you get all the color? You're not getting all the color. And that requires different ways of using your eyes, though, to see it all. But it's always the relational truth, though. Tattoo says, Facebook groups can also be a way to organize a group. Ability to post work for discussion, Zoom meetup, and Paul's videos. That question of Paul's videos, I'd like to know what you mean by that, Tattoo. I've done Zoom before with people. I've never done anything with Facebook. I've heard of Facebook groups. I've never done anything with it. So that's a good question. Have you ever had the feeling that you're getting right now if we did that? Okay, so, okay. Have you thought about, this is Steve, have you thought about interviewing Stapleton to get his input on Gamel's teaching? No, I haven't. Stapleton's time with him was very short, but it wouldn't be a bad thing. The reason I grabbed Tom Donnelly is that he spent somewhere at least in the range of 4 or 5, whatever numbers of years, is a good number of years. Another person who you all may not know, David Lowery, spent a bunch of years with him. Even to see the time of the spent with him with that David Curtis spent with him. Unfortunately, rest in peace, Dave. We've just lost David Curtis just recently, and I want to say that with all kindness. He was one of the best people you could ever meet, kind to everyone, right in every possible way that I ever saw, and an open, generous, giving guy in painting, just amazing. And his teaching on the hillside of what he'd learned primarily in the North Shore, with all those teachers up there, including his father as a painter. So that was good stuff. But excusing that pause. Why did I say I got a little distracted? I wanted to talk about him. I better stop doing that. But there's a great guy. But neither one of those two guys spent as much time with him. It would have been more interesting to talk to Richard Lack. And who else would be useful? I disagree with certain other people that worked a bunch of time with Gamel, and I'm not sure we'd agree on anything, but there are some other good interviews out there. If you know somebody else that spent more than a year with Gamel, and by the way, I will make some effort to look up Stapleton and see if that could be interesting. We at the Guild, there are at least 5 or 6 of us who are members of the Guild of Boston Artists, and we are going to be having some sort of a get-together in which we form a panel and we're going to be talking Gamel. So I'll try to get that out to you guys when that happens, or figure out some way to get a videotape so that can be shared with you. I got to be careful here to finish this up for you guys. I know we're running over now.
There's a couple after the cutoff that I wanted you to hit.
Have you marked the cutoff for me, Whitaker?
You see your name there.
Oh, right. Got it, good. All right. So, yeah, these guys, there aren't that many more of you guys to pick up before you all know where you are on this list. Kernel cadmium plateaus get longer and longer, and steps get higher and higher. The trick is to keep climbing. Actually, Troy, I used to say to students, I agree with you. I used to say to students, the air gets thinner, and a lot of people don't like at top of Mount Everest, your lungs hurt. I mean, and the risk of falling, is to your death, So a lot of people don't like it up there, but it's also harder to stand. The higher you get, so it's just interesting stuff. There are many other kinds of allegories. I've always thought of it as steps and plateaus, though. I agree with you. And I used to say the steps, there's this vertical part that's all black. And if you're not in the black, you're not struggling. And all of a sudden, just for no reason at all, you can even make out, you sense that something's happening. You're starting to wake up to something. And there's this dinky bit of light down in the tunnel, way in the distance. Or not in the tunnel, but somehow glimmering. You sense there's something's changed, a little light. And before you know it, you're flying again across this plateau. It's you've done a great job of bringing that, using that metaphor. But I found literally, I was having dreams about vertical black steps, like I was being an ant climbing them. And then I was picturing getting around this, and your ant is now going to have to be upside, it was just like madness, right? But the only thing that kept you going was this hint of light. And then just thinking, man, I've just won something. And what was happening is each time I would get to these places, I'd think, oh, I've just arrived. Well, the Gogh said, madam, in my day we didn't arrive, and that's actually what you want. If you're not finding more of those things, then you've quit in a certain way, right? Are you looking for the next question? Are you satisfied? Fascinating, wonderful question, isn't it? And a point you made, well made. Mr. Producer should organize and set up a Discord server. Yes, says Emil. He's really onto that. Emil's really definitely. He still hasn't told me where he lives, where he's from, but he probably did, though, didn't you? Anyway, Sam says, we've done regular online critiques through Dominique Medici Atelier in Seattle. She demos, then we put in our work, and half the session is critique reference to technique or concept. Yeah, I'm not into teaching that way yet, or teaching, but I am but the critiquing is an interesting, different question, right? It's just one of those funny things you think about the Academy Julienne when these guys were saying that Bouguereau would come in and tell you to do something one day, and then Boulanger would come and tell you ask why you're doing that stupid thing the next day. You'd be in this world of who in the heck is in charge around here? Because there's no unity, and that's the one risk of a person like me just critiquing. But to the extent that you're trying to do something that incorporates the knowledge that I'm projecting out to you, the stuff related to the science of appearances and or even to whatever extent my way of working with the visual stuff. That kind of stuff, can be pretty specific and not drive you nuts. I do know that what the Boulanger, Lefebvre, Bouguereau combine was doing was confusing for a number of people who talk about it in some of the writings.
think the next, can you just hit the Jocko one after the break there?
Oh yeah. So I.
Something else that you need to document. I mean, there's a question of prices that you're.
Okay. All right. So you're saying I shouldn't do the? Do I need to do the Jocko one and make that the last one? Okay, got it.
Right after that cutoff, because you're pretty much at the end now.
Okay. Are your portraits of real people from life over multiple sittings? Yes. Yes, they are. You can't get away anymore with the 90 sittings of Sargent or the, there's a little head by Paxton. It was 30. How many sittings was it? 30 some odd sittings. Are you saying I'm not on anymore? But
Just take your hand off your microphone. That's it. But you already did.
oh, gee, I'm sorry. Yeah. Where's my wardrobe person anyway? And I'll read the whole question. Are your portraits of real people from life over multiple sittings? And then there's pastiches of the optical observations of the real, or rather a conglomeration of idealized visual impressions, or both. Boy, you're way outside. This is one that's going to need clarity. I don't use terms like you're using here. So, but I can tell you that what I'm doing is I have a concept of the whole fixed in my mind and eye. And then what I'm doing is, but it's still to do that, you're having to then paint piecemeal. So you're painting parts and pieces and keeping on watching the relationships of the whole. But the grand unity of the whole thing is the impression in front of you right now. Some of which may change, like the hair or some aspects of the drapery, and give you an improved composition and that sort of thing. But I don't think you'd ever say, in my way of working, that I'd ever say that I do pastiches of. Well, not, yeah, so pastiches is the funny word there. So I don't know how to handle that. I'm going to give you time to say something more. My producer, Mr. Producer, is telling me to get out of this, but put in if you have a different way of saying one of those 2 points, or conglomeration of idealized visual impression. I don't have anything idealized, so I wouldn't use the word idealized about anything I'm doing. Do you follow what I'm saying? So what I am painting is the magic of that spot and trying to incorporate it in the big magic, right? You see what I mean? So the word magic might imply ideal, but I don't, paint an ideal nose, for example, or when I'm setting models up, I create my ideal. So when I put a person, the background I put them in front of makes their face the right color. The color sings, makes their face really sing, actually. Most painters do that. Hence so many backgrounds of portraits are green, for example, because the good colors in the face are coming through. You're eliminating some of the yellow, some of the blue. So you tend to the healthy, what we think of as the healthier orangey warm tone, orangey red tones, the peachy tones, So, but that's the nearest thing. And so, it's there already in front of me. So I'm not idealizing it. You see what I mean? I'm not trying to make it prettier than it is. But if you want to put that further, I'll go to that. So I'm supposed to quit here. So I am going to thank you though for your questions and comments and.
Anders asked about where you can.
Oh, where are the prices listed? Okay, sorry, I missed that. You want me to talk about that? Where are the prices listed for full-time study? I tell you, I don't know where they're listed. I don't know that we list them actually. Right now, I'm just a $6,000 a year. I try to be half the price of the next person up. So I might be somebody down lower, but I've tried to give this away, and I can't afford to. I can't afford to be losing time. So, what I'm doing online here is the giving away portion. What you get me doing now. Somebody, I want to say this to you, that somebody said at one point that they considered it their obligation, with certain information, it was their obligation to give it freely, to open the conversation up to everybody when they have knowledge. And the freely you've received, freely give model of Christ. That's, I think it was Christ who said that. But what I found is that there's also the workman is worthy of his hire. So it's not like you're trying to take, I still have to make a living. I don't come from this wealth. But Gamel, who did come from wealth, gave it. And I really would like to emulate him. But so that's what I'm saying about price. I'm elaborating. But that's my number for this moment. And I'm still at a bit of a quandary of how we're going to survive in Massachusetts. Our building's just been bought, and whether it's going to go over the top in terms of I've found places to work. The one I'm in now is really quite beautiful for the job. Great Northlight. All the things we've done are great. And those are places, though, that I've found, like you classically do, looking for the best rate for the students. So to keep my prices down. And I've been very fortunate so far.
You wanted me to remind you about the Gogh question from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. So is that down here?
It's way at the top. Spin back.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Go back to it.
Okay. So I'm looking at this thing and thinking, this is all good stuff for you guys. So I'm just glancing through toward the end of this. Everybody forgive me if I overlook you. I think I've mostly covered the stuff that'd be good to cover. So my cutoff point that was already given to me by my producer is done. Let me go all the way back up. Gogh, if you had any more to say, I'm going to put you in there. But I draw for sculpting and forms rather than for the whole gamut of visual perception. Yeah. But I still learn a lot from you. Yes, never give up on that. I would say to you, YZ, just never give up on that. I wanted to make sure I got anybody with content said, but don't give up on that, YZ. Stay with that. But learn to incorporate more, learn to be a bigger painter. That's all I'm trying to recommend. Okay, so Gogh was way at the beginning with the point that I told him I'd come back to. I'm looking for it. Gogh.
I can read it to you.
Oh, yeah, read it to me so I get...
In Venn diagram of painters/eras, which artist is the most different from you that you were surprised?
Oh, yeah.
have meaningful things in common?
I'm sorry you reminded me of that. I still haven't thought of anything for you, Gogh. That's the one about who do I have most in common with that I have nothing in common with. Yeah, that sort of thing. And one of these days I'll mention it online, okay, so stay tuned. Yeah. But that question, there's an early Gogh question where I talk about, for David, I think it was David Salt, you might go to that Gogh thing not too far down into the video, and it was at 1956 actually, in the video. And because that's where he asked that question, I try to answer about all the things I value most in good paintings. Okay, all right. I think that's it. That is. Am I right, Mr. Producer? We've called it a day. So, guys, any other information you can give me about what to do in terms of making this more useful to you, please do it. Please send me whatever you got. I love being with you. I love the way we're in this together in a harmonious search. I mean, in a mutual search. So anything I can do to be of service and believe me, every time I work with people in their conversations, I learn something too. So don't be thinking this is a one-way street. So, okay. So thank you very much, everybody. So many great new faces, so many kind contributions in this one, and it's just been really, really, really nice event. And we'll see you in the next one, okay? Or the next video. So take care.